Welcome to Comics and Manga's Reader's Advisory for middle grade and teens, presented by Library Pass and Comics Plus. My name is Gila Charles Gonzalez. I'm the Chief Content and Marketing Officer for Library Pass and the moderator for today's session. I'm excited to be joined by our three guests who will be sharing their expertise and insights with us today. Today's webinar is presented by Library Pass. We curate high-interest, immersive digital content that helps libraries and schools expand their reach and engagement without breaking their materials budget. Our Comics Plus platform offers unlimited simultaneous access to thousands of digital comics, manga, and picture books in collections curated for schools, academic, and public libraries. Learn more and sign up for a free demo account at comicsplusapp.com. And now, enjoy today's session. So I'm excited to welcome back what I've called our librarian dream team. We've got Moni Barrette, Stella Bromley, and Ashley Hawkins, all three librarians. Moni and Stella currently work with me here at Library Pass, and Ashley is everyone's favorite manga librarian. We are going to talk about one of the more requested topics that we've had in the past. How do you do reader's advisory for comics and manga? And in particularly, how do you do it for middle grade and teens? Before we jump into the overall topic, I want to talk a little bit about middle grade and teens. Let's define what that means, because there's every year there's 3 or 4 articles in the trade press that kids aren't reading anymore. Middle grade in particular has been claimed to be a declining category, and yet those same articles always talk about how comics and manga have grown, particularly over the past 5 years from 2020 forward. And there's always this weird disconnect that fundamentally is people in the industry still don't believe comics and manga are real books. And so middle grade declining is basically these kids are reading too many comics and manga. So we're here to tell you how that's a good thing and how to take advantage of that. So the first thing we're going to discuss, and I'm going to off and on share my screen so that we can set the stage for these talking points. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, what are comics? And one of the most common starting points is the understanding that comics is a medium, not a genre. Despite BISAC codes that kind of suggest comics are a genre, comics are a medium. Manga are comics in Japan. And comics as a medium encompasses pretty much every genre you can think of, particularly when it comes to manga. Manga probably has a broader range of genres that Western comics don't tend to touch. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But first, we just wanted big picture, versatile medium, wide range of formats. And formats is where people get tripped up. Comics broadly is the medium. That includes comic strips, comic books. Graphic novels, I kind of say, are what people who are embarrassed by comics decided to call longer form comic books. Technically, they tend to be original stories in a single volume as opposed to serialized comic books. Trade paperbacks are basically graphic novels collecting individual issues of a story that was previously told in periodic form. You've got manga, manhwa, and manhwa, Japan, Korea, and China. You've got bande dessinée, which is European comics, I think primarily Belgian and French. Then you've got digital comics, web comics, and webtoons. These are all fundamentally the comics formats for the comics medium. So let's talk a little bit about a couple of the areas that came up a lot in some of the questions we got. And first, let's define comics let's walk away from the comics are for kids. And Moni, let's talk a little bit about comics from an adult perspective. How do you explain comics to an adult reader?
I mean, comics for adults, first of all, adult readers love comics too. And whether that's a carryover from nostalgia for when they were reading strips, comic strips in the funny papers, or if that's something new, because there is a glut not only of wonderful fiction topics that appeal to adults in such a diverse range, and as we saw from all around the world, but also there are a growing number of wonderful nonfiction topics for all ages. But when we're talking about adults, we are looking at anything from graphic medicine. You know, you receive a dense medical diagnosis and you want to understand it better. Something with pictures is going to help you figure out what parts of the body are affected or whatever else. You know, comics bring adult readers together the same as anyone else in terms of book clubs and different kinds of activities that you can do that I know we'll get into. So yeah, just, you know, it's such a pervasive and ugly kind of stereotype that because they have pictures, they're only for children. And honestly, anyone who feels that way is really missing out on just a glut of other types of content.
Stella, let's talk about comics from a younger reader, kid's perspective, and particularly with your background as a school librarian, any potential classroom angle to that definition.
Just like a normal or a text book, we have the same elements. We have the same ELA elements. We have plot, we have characters, we have settings. So all of those can be studied in a comic book or in a graphic novel, especially when it's a one condensed story. You have all of those features available in a book, and middle schoolers do love them. I have worked at a middle school, I've worked at a high school. They do love them. They're fast, they're easy, they move with them just as much as they move.
And staying in the school librarian world, but moving over to manga, Ashley, the manga librarian, let's talk a little bit about comics from the manga perspective and a little bit about what is and isn't different between so-called comics and manga.
So really, manga is just the Japanese word for comics. If you say manga in Japanese, you could be greeted with a volume of Spider-Man. But when we talk about manga, we are talking about Japanese comics. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. But we're really talking about serialized stories that were drawn and written and were originally collected in magazines or more frequently now in digital formats. We actually are pretty different from Japanese readers of manga. Manga does much better. Sorry, in manga does much better in digital format in Japan than it does in physical. Physical is mostly for the collectors. So we just kind of read these books in they're serialized. Sometimes what is a little bit different is manga is usually it needs to be read from volume 1 to volume whatever is the end. If you're talking One Piece, it might be 100 plus. Or it could be volume 12, or it could be a single volume. There's a wide range. And manga is very much entrenched in Japanese life. Everyone reads some form of manga. And you'll even see advertisements in Japan that are in manga format and have manga style. Manga is very much a part of everyday life. And I think that is something that is a little bit different. There's just a linguistic format to manga. So that I think is part of the difference. And I think that's also part of the appeal to young people who read manga. Once you start to know the language, you can really get into it and you can really understand it on a deeper level.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting nuance as we shift to talk about web and digital is, to your point, in Japan, serialized, very mobile friendly. Like Japan went to mobile reading much more aggressively and faster than we did in the US. And then you look at web comics, quote unquote, in the US, long time considered very niche, very amateur in a lot of ways. And then webtoons in particular, webtoon, the platform, really blew up really globally, but really started to find traction in the US. And fundamentally, in my mind, besides story, art, and all that stuff, one of the core differences is web comics tended to be traditional comic strip style formatting on a web page, and webtoons tend to be that vertical scroll that is very familiar to people addicted to social media, but also has really taken off on the comic side. So there are kind of two types of digital comics when you think about the digital format. There's traditional web comics and digital versions of print comics, like we have on Comics Plus. And then you've got the vertical scroll experience that there are some platforms that are actively converting Western comics to that, including many of them working with Webtoon itself. So you really do, beyond a diversity of genres, you really do have a really wide range of formats when it comes to the medium as well. All right, so let's move on to the next category that we had a lot of questions about, and that is building and managing your collection. A lot of questions about how to do it, what to include, where, how to shelve it, how to break things down. So what we've gathered here, when I say we reassembled our panelists, last year we did a Comics 101 panel. All of these tips came out of that panel. So we've collected them here. Like I mentioned, these slides will be available after the session, so you can access them. So rather than rehash these particular points, you guys can review these after the session. What I'm going to ask our panelists today is, what's your favorite tip when it comes to a librarian who maybe isn't necessarily familiar with comics? They're not a reader themselves, but they've got an audience for it. They've got patrons or students who have an interest. They are building a collection. What is your kind of number one tip to get the most out of that activity? And we'll start with Ashley.
I mean, for me, I'm usually asked by people who are looking to purchase manga, like, where should I focus? And I always say, if you're starting a collection, start with just the first 3 volumes. And then you can get things like Comics Plus, you can build your digital collection, and you can, when you're building that physical collection, just worry about the attention grabbing first few volumes, because those are going to be your high circulators anyway. And then your dedicated readers, they will make the jump to digital, and then they will realize the ease of access and the fact that they will not have to wait for somebody to bring the volume back. And your in-depth readers, they will see the value in that, because otherwise they will be like the one of my students who today was like, "Mrs. My Hero Academia Volume 3 back yet?" And I'm like, "No, it is still not back. I'm sorry. I can keep sending the overdue notices out, but it's not back yet." So, and finally, we did the jump to digital today, where he finally was like, "Fine, I'll do it." But I think that's really important to have your attention grabbers, just those first few volumes, and then build your digital collection, because physical, it can vanish on you. It can, you know, physical can be very temporary, but digital is often very reliable when the physical evaporates. So
I think it's actually, if you walk into a Barnes and Noble and look at just their manga section, forget about their Western comics section. Few libraries have that much space to dedicate just to their comics collection. And even Barnes and Noble often does not have, they're not carrying all 100 volumes of One Piece. So you definitely have to pick and choose. I think that's a good one to highlight. Stella, what's your favorite tip?
I am going to share a tip that to keep you from falling into the void that I did. I had a small group of students that were reading, and I did not balance my collection for the entire population. So I realized a year into this, or 2.5 years into it, that I had the same kids. The same students were reading, and they were asking for things, and I was happily going in and buying them with my extra money, and And, and I got a lot out of that, big hearts, because every time I came on campus and had the book that next book, they were happy, but I wasn't building my readership. So my tip for you is to build for your entire reading population. Make sure that you're getting the best of everything that you're seeing. Read those reviews, find the things that are popular. I went down a very manga track for a while, and then I went down a DC track for a while. So make sure that you're building for your entire reading population and the things that everybody will like. So reading those reviews and making sure that you're balanced in that way.
Cool. And in a little bit, we'll get into how to find that balance, what resources. We'll get into that in a little bit. Moni, what's your favorite?
I think really both of them hit it so well that I'll just kind of like button up both of their points. So just really, you have to think of your collection, your comics and manga as an investment for your community, just like the rest of your collection. And so you want to get the most value for your buck. And some of the ways that you can do that would be the volumes 1 through 3. I love that idea, and get them to transition that balance of digital and print. Also, knowing what is already being read in your traditional print, books within the library. So if you have an avid romance community, if they're big into nonfiction and you're serving like an aging demographic, whatever that looks like, start to mirror that with your comics collections. And I do think that too, like after they read the first few, they will ask for the next one. And if they don't, then either it's gone missing or, or it's not as popular as you had hoped it would be. So just consistently monitoring both the circulation on the back end and also obviously, your patrons, whether they're students or public library setting. So what is the community saying? What types of programming have they asked for in the past that wasn't specific to comics, but you're like, oh, they want to do a cooking class, I can get more manga about cooking or things like that. It's just that whole awareness and approach to as much balance and bang for your buck as you can get.
All right. And in the slides, there's a link to that 101 webinar archive that has a lot more information about that. So let's talk about programming and classrooms. We had a lot of questions about what kind of programming can you do with comics and manga, how to integrate comics into the classroom, whether by request or by interest. Sometimes teachers are maybe resistant to it, and it's how do I make that happen when teachers are resistant? Or teachers are interested, what's the right way to approach it so that they get the best out of it? So what we've got here on the slides are a bunch of high-level examples. Some of these are resources we have available. A lot of these are examples that most librarians are familiar with, even if not necessarily in the context of comics and manga. And to me, that's probably the most important thing. There's probably no programming you do that comics and manga couldn't fit, but there are probably certain programming ideas that are uniquely suited for comics and manga. So like we did before, we won't go through an exhaustive list, but starting with Stella, what's one of your favorite programming or classroom connection activities that you would recommend?
I have to say one that I heard from Chesterfield, Virginia, was to read one of the classics. So in the classroom, the students with the teacher were reading, I believe it was Macbeth. And then they came to the library and they read the 5 or 6 different adaptations that Comics Plus had. So she divided them up into groups, and each group is reading a different adaptation. And that allowed them to then have conversations. And we talked about, when she was telling me about the lesson, I was like, well, you could jigsaw and have those students go and share what they learned about in this adaptation. Oh, I really realized this line in Macbeth, or I really could see this now. I now understand how this happened. And she felt it went really successful. Like I said, she used the classroom teacher, collaborated with her, and they read the original text. They brought in some areas that they wanted to get clarification on. They divided into different adaptations, and then they shared out what they learned from, and that's visual literacy right there. So not only are you hitting the ELA standard, you're hitting visual literacy and the oral piece, talking to each other and explaining your information. So that was one of my favorites that I heard about recently.
That's cool. Yeah, I've heard of adaptations, but not that way. Is there, does that concept have a name or? All right. We'll have to go back to that library to have them give that approach a name. That's cool. All right. Ashley, what's one of your favorites?
Um, so I did write a whole book of manga lesson plans, or co-authored a book
This is
of,
a good moment to mention
yeah.
that book. Yes.
So yeah, I did co-author a book called Manga Goes to School through AESL, and so we did a lot of really cool lessons. But one of my favorite things to do that I think is most widely applicable is to do manga journaling, and that's where you just have students journal about what it is that they're reading. So it's very much just like a reading journal, but also you can get kind of artsy with it. Manga journaling is very popular on social media as well. So you can kind of draw what you're experiencing. So it's very multimodal, and dipping into the multimodal nature of manga. And I've gotten some really cool reflections from kids that I would never get from them from traditional prose books. Reflections on Chainsaw Man that were very in depth from kids that never responded in the traditional classroom, that were just very in depth and very personal, about like internalized misogyny and things like that. So it's very cool to just kind of let them really delve into why these stories mean so much to them, because I do think that with the reason why manga and graphic novels and comics resonate so much with young people is more than just like they like pictures. It's the stories resonate very deeply with them. So engaging with that, it does something very deep.
Cool. All right. And Moni, what's yours?
Something fun, but it can kind of spread awareness for the magic of comics in general, is you can do blind date with a comic book. And there's a couple ways you can do it. One of them is pretty fun. You can do a display with your books kind of like wrapped up, and you just put, whether you want to put a real short description. Some people will do it where it's like the book is talking, I'm a mystery and you should unwrap me, kind of fun. Obviously, they'll put like what age it's appropriate for and any trigger warnings on there, and then someone can decide to check that out. That's a fun way, if folks aren't regularly reading comics, even to find that like, oh, I love cozy mysteries and there's a comic for that. Another thing that I've seen done, particularly at conventions and things, is the comics librarians will do, like, you submit a short form, which you could totally do in the library, that's like, what TV shows and things am I reading? What am I already consuming? What would I not want to read? And then they'll come up with a book for you that you can then seek out on your own. Obviously, at a library, hopefully you could provide it. It would be one that you would have. But I just think that's a really fun approach to helping people kind of explore comics a little bit more.
Cool. Coincidentally, reader's advisory adjacent. I like that. So the other very common, every webinar we produce gets versions of this question. If you're not a comics and manga reader yourself, where do you go to get information, to learn about what's out there, to find reviews? We put together a bunch of core resources, combination of blogs, magazines, some others. I'll do a couple of quick shout outs here, and then we'll turn to our panelists for theirs. Excuse me. So on the other, quick shout out for us, we do a lot of readers advisory content. Moni has a monthly Pick Six column where she's typically either genre or topic centric, basically readers advisory for that genre or topic with recommended titles for different age levels. Stella is one of our co-writers of our Classroom Connections resource, where we're identifying particular comics that align with classroom standards, usually tied to a particular topic or genre. I'm putting those out there so that they don't have to take their time talking about those. And we will have Ashley talk about her website, the Manga Librarian. Um, Graphic Novel Comics Roundtable is also a very good resource with the ALA. And if you're a Mac, even if you're not a Mackin customer, Mackin's database that anybody can sign up for actually has a really good, if they have the title, they tend to have review information and some additional criteria. So if you're looking for a little more insight into age appropriateness, or you want a quick way to find reviews that somebody else gathered for you, Mackin's website is actually a pretty good resource for that. So let's turn back to our panelists and let's talk about, so I think we're going to start with adjusting my notes. We're going to start with Ashley. And first, tell us about your site and maybe even your book. And then if you've got something else you want to throw out there as well.
My site is Manga Librarian. I provide lists, reviews, also some more in-depth cultural and background information about manga, manhwa, light novels. Basically, if people ask me about it, but it's usually referring to East Asian popular culture in reference to literature or graphic novel, comic sphere. So I do keep up my lists. I actually have like a major list that I have that is everything that I review either on my site or on Booklist, which I am one of 3 manga reviewers for. So we do a lot of reviews. So I will also say the other person that I will recommend is Sarah Smith from the Graphic Library, who does a lot of work, and she is one of the co-authors on Manga Goes to School, and she is super amazing. And I go to her all the time for advice on Western comics because I am not as well versed in that world. Like I read some, but I am it's only like what I kind of feel like is fun, and then I see what my kids are reading, but it is not like the depth that I go into with manga. And so I kind of lean on her quite a bit. So I would say she's really great for that space. So yeah.
Cool. All right. Moni, what's yours?
I mean, as you mentioned from the work that we do here, I live and breathe a lot of those resources, but I'll shout out the ALA's Graphic Novel and Comics Roundtable because there's a variety of things that you can find there, anything from really comprehensive best practices for comics and manga cataloging. There's YouTube panels on all different types of comics related discussions. They've got a toolkit for bans and challenges specific for comics. There's a lot of space for community there, which is really great as, you know, people who have been working in libraries and comics or not for a long time, any level can kind of come and meet there. Best of lists, those are pretty cool from the librarian perspective of like best of for adults and also best of for kids and teens lists. And ways to get involved, whether that's volunteering virtually or going to the conventions and conferences that they do. And also they have an Eisner grant for librarians, which is highly competitive, but the stories that come out of like the winners are just amazing. But it's an opportunity to apply. And especially if you haven't gone through kind of a grant process, you learn a lot just in the application process. And then you have the opportunity to win money for a collection, which is, when we're talking about great ways to start a new collection, is a nice doorway into that. And some really deserving communities have won that grant that it's administered via the GNCRT as well. So
Cool. All right. Stella?
Just say School Library Journal. In fact, I was reading a book, and we're going to talk a little bit about it later, so I won't tell you that part, but I happened to read one of their articles, and there was the book that I was reading. So definitely check them. They are adding, you know, a great variety of books to their reviews and to their themed articles each month. Highly recommend.
Cool. All right. I'm going to throw one in, and I forget if one of you said it in the last time we were together, or if it was a different webinar. It was definitely a librarian, but one of my favorite pieces of advice was talk to your readers. Whether it's your kids or if you're in a public library, whatever readers that are engaging with the collection you have, don't just, to Moni's point, don't just look at circulation. Actually talk to them, find out about what they're interested in, what else are they reading, whether other comics, manga, or other types of books, other media. Um, the more you know about that, which I'm not a librarian, my understanding is that is kind of part of the reader's advisory process, understanding what the reader is into beyond just what they might be looking for in a book. That was my favorite piece of kind of like, oh yeah, that seems like a no-brainer, but everybody was like, oh yeah, that's a really good one when they brought it up. So I'll throw that one. So before we move to the RA, we've got some good recommendations and read-alikes. I've got Stella. There was a question about your collection advice. Did more people come to use the collection after you started to expand it, and how did you promote it?
Signs everywhere. I had a really good system of posting things around the library. I had a really good connection with my ELA teachers, especially my ninth grade ELA teachers. They were super supportive. They came to the library regularly, whether it was 10 minutes or 15 minutes. I moved the collection to the center of the room, so there were no barriers to get to it. And I made it a comfortable spot. And it slowly started trickling in where there were more people checking out books, because we were also talking about it more, and we were doing more programming. Like I had a Pokemon competition and we did an anime club. And I have to say, this was back in 2012. So we were moving and shaking back then. And what happened is those people that were reading, those fans, were talking to others and bringing them over. I remember specifically like walking around and helping ninth graders find a book, and another student taking a student that I was talking to and said, no, you need to go over here, and took them over to the comic section. So the more you talk about it, more that they see it, the more they'll share with others. They'll feel more comfortable. They'll feel validated. So yes, it did grow after that.
Nice. All right, so what everybody joined us for, let's talk about read-alikes and readers advisory. So what I asked our panelists to do, we took 3 age groups. We took middle grade, teen, and young adult, and I asked them to each pick a book for one of those, each of those age levels, talk about that book, and then offer a couple, 2 or 3 read-alikes for those books, excuse me, to kind of practice those muscles of here's an interesting book, and here's how to identify books that a person who likes that book might also enjoy. Whether these are, you might have heard of the specific book being recommended or one of the read-alikes. Again, all of these slides will be available in the deck that we'll post after the session. So let's start with, first up, we've got Moni talking about Kyle's little sister.
Yeah, so middle grade, this one's a lot of fun, and essentially it's technically manga. Grace starts school with her big brother Kyle, and she's always had a life of like being Kyle's little sister, as it says. But now that they're in the same school, it's kind of exacerbated because some of her girlfriends have crushes on some of his friends, and it's a whole thing. And they don't really have much interaction within the home. But then you get someone comes in and tries to create trouble. And what I like about it is it feels high stakes and high drama and super fun. Honestly, it reads a lot like some of the stories that my own middle grader comes and tells me from a school day. But it's, it ends up really kind of being low stakes and kind of a safe book where everyone kind of comes to good conclusions. So with that same kind of realistic fiction, that school life feel, we have Amy's Big Brother, which is by the same author. We also have Crush, which is really popular on the Comics Plus. These are all available on the Comics Plus platform, by the way, also by Yen Press. And that one has a whole series too. So, there's some rabbit holes for your readers to go down. And then you have Kinsey, which is a superhero comic that's won some awards and again has that kind of middle grade feel. And yeah, obviously there's a lot of tie over with people who still love comics about superheroes. So you have that, but also, you know, you will relate to the main character and really kind of feel for her as she navigates life within her family. So all of these kind of have that same highly relatable characters, as I mentioned, feel, and like I said, that dishy fun of that middle grade lifestyle.
Cool. All right. Next up, we've got Ashley, who's going to tell us about Cat and Crazy.
So this is Cat Plus Crazy by one of my favorite mangaka, Wataru Nadatani. And it is actually the manga that she wrote before Cat Plus Gamer, which is a very popular manga. And it's surprisingly action-packed. It is all about how to befriend cats. So it features a young boy who is obsessed with cats but can't live with cats. If you've ever read Azumanga Daioh, there is a character who is in a similar dilemma. And so loves cats, and he finds this sort of cat guru who has formed a cat martial art, which is all about like making cats happy. And so he just is learning the way of pleasing and just making cats happy, but there's like some action to it. And so it kind of scratches the itch for kids that are not quite ready for especially if you're in like that elementary setting that's like right on the cusp and you just can't quite get One Piece. You can't quite get those titles. Cat Plus Crazy will fill that it'll fill that gap for you, where there's a little bit of action, there's a little bit of just that zany nonsense because it is a shonen title. So just yeah, it's the mix of shonen plus Cheese Sweet Home. So
Cool. All right. And Stella's up next with our last middle grade recommendation with a little twist on the readalikes.
Yes, took this very literal and I wanted to talk about nonfiction. I feel like everybody thinks of comics and thinks of only the, superheroes and the made up stories, but there is a tremendous amount of nonfiction out there and I love reading it. It definitely helps me to understand some concepts a lot better. For instance, I was sharing with my husband that I learned the difference between an arm and a tentacle. I'm going to let you read the book to figure that out too. But I like this idea of reading nonfiction and learning facts. I love that we have a cookbook, Cook Like Ancestors, in each recipe. If you've never read a cookbook, take some time and take a look at them because they do have stories within them. A lot of them will tell you where the recipes came from, or they'll explain the method that's used to cook, or they'll explain the ingredients, where they come from and how they've evolved and been used by different cultures. There's a whole storyline even in cookbooks. So I really liked that one. And then I also had Climate Crisis Chronicles. That was the book I was reading that is on let me get the exact title, 7 nature-themed graphic novels to inspire kids to explore the great outdoors. That was the article in School Library Journal. But I'm a Dumbo Octopus is super sweet. He talks about all the different types of squid, octopus, and then he realizes that he's like shared everybody's goodness, but he hasn't talked about himself, and the others come in and tell all the interesting facts about the Dumbo, and that is the true name of an octopus, Dumbo octopus.
Nice. All right. And just as a reference point, while Dumbo Octopus is kind of the middle grade, the Cook Like Your Ancestors, teen, and Climate Chronicles, more of a YA level book. All right, so let's go back to Ashley and let's get our first teen recommendation.
All right, so this is an award-winning manga. The guy she was interested in wasn't a guy at all. It is popularly known as Green Yuri, and it is a gorgeous manga about two girls in love with rock music and maybe each other. But what's really great about it is the two girls are kind of finding community through hanging out in um, this cool CD shop because CD shops are still a thing in Japan. Um, because, you know, analog is retro and therefore cool. You can still go to buy physical media. And so they're just bonding over these esoteric bands like Nirvana and the Rolling Stones and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And so it's really great. There's this lovely twist in the first volume where one of the protagonists believes the other one is a dude, but she's not. But it's all fine. It all works out. And it's just great for great music vibes. The art is gorgeous. It really like sings off of the page. And yeah, the two readalikes are also music related, also have a little bit of girls love vibes. Rock is a Lady's Modesty is a new one from Yen Press. And it's just got more actually playing music. And the same with Whisper Me a Love Song is also just learning to love music and also form bonds together. So it's kind of the young love sort of sweetness.
Uh, for those who don't know, can you quickly define Yuri and Yaoi Yuri?
So yori is the word for relationships between two girls or two women. Um, I would say, and there's actually differentiation between girls' love and Yuri. Girls' love would be a little bit more softer. So technically, they call it Green Yuri, but it's really girls' love. It's more just like a sweet little story about two girls who have affection for each other. Yuri would usually be a bit more heavy, a little bit more spicy. Um, and yaoi would be the male equivalent, and boys love would be also the male equivalent. And it kind of is the same thing. Yaoi would be a little bit more spicy. BL or boys love would be a little bit more, just kind of affection between two boys. So but it can be used interchangeably, so always check your age ratings and always check content before you purchase anything because, as with any romance, all romance can kind of scale up very rapidly. Romance is just it's romance. So,
All right, caveat taken. Moni, you're up next with what we don't talk about.
This one was a nice surprise. Obviously, it's about an interracial couple, and at first they have kind of a seemingly idyllic relationship. That is until Foray goes to visit Adam's family, and there she experiences everything from microaggressions to outright racism to kind of just like also like intentional misunderstanding in air quotes of who she is as a person and her background at the hands of kind of Adam's mother in particular. And what impressed me about it was just, it felt very modern in, I was really impressed by how she stands up for herself in the situation. And I think that it's a great jumping off point and age appropriate, however, to talk about these issues, to say, you're not imagining it when you think you're hearing these things. And also it's not asking too much for your partner, whatever partner you choose in life, to want to stand up for you or to have your back in certain situations. So I thought that was really handled well. Great one to read, relatively short. And then readalikes. Now, these aren't the same exact topics, but again, I think that jumping off points for classrooms, for library discussions, for contemporary issues, everything from Banned Book Club, Puerto Rico Strong, and Becoming Who We Are, Real Stories About Growing Up Trans. What they all have in common, these are all indie published, indie creators, and a lot of them are firsthand, first person accounts of these things. And again, positive and age appropriate takes on a lot of contemporary issues that teens will be talking about, whether you're addressing them with them or not.
Point. All right. And then Stella, tell us about softies.
Softies, stuff that happens after the world blows up, is a fun. I love dystopian. And, I realized in looking at, I was looking at some of the younger grades with the middle grade, that it's not all about the doom and gloom of dystopian, what happens after the world blows up or what happens after, things crash, right? Or people become zombies. There's a lot of nuances in dystopian. And this one, I was looking for something a little lighter. I was looking for middle grade. And I loved it that this girl, Kay, somehow is hermetically sealed when the world blows up. And she ends up being sucked up by this garbage truck in space that is trying to find things to sell, basically. And Kay ends up inside of his trash compactor, along with a ton of other stuff that she ends up collecting because she's trying to pull the world back, Earth back together. But along the way, they're stopping off at different planets. They get into different adventures. The three-eyed mecha dog is hilarious. He's an assistant. He's a laugh generator, but it's super colorful, lots of action. And whereas my other two choices are both dystopian. So that's my teen choice. My kid's choice is the Shepherd Herders. That's hard to say. Warriors Volume 1, which is kind of a medieval fantasy dystopian because the world, in their world, has changed. The men have been off, and the women, the shepherd, I can't say it, have been taking care of the world. And this is a story of them coming to learn what their special powers are. Because remember, we have that fantasy magical piece in it. The sheep in this book are so incredibly cute. They all have little personalities and they're colored different. They're just super cute. So watch them too. Make sure that you're following their facial and their body positions. The last one does become a little more on the downside, more of your typical dystopian. And but it's almost surreal. It's so real that sometimes you're like, was that part of the story or was that part of the fantasy? And it's about a boy that loses his father and ends up going to the other side of the country that is totalitarianism, and art, music, all of those lovely things are not allowed. But he is an artist at heart, and he learns how to bring that about and why it's important. So that was an interesting take on 3 different types of dystopian fiction.
Cool. All right. So that shifts us into our YA category, kind of the older teens. The open secret in the industry is most YA books are read by adults. We're still approaching this as directed towards older teens, but probably also of interest to adults. So Moni, you're up first with Cheer Up.
So cheer up, kind of the loose theme for all of these is kind of like femme romance or friendship. Essentially, Annie is an overachiever who needs to kind of pad her college application. So her mom signs her up for cheerleading, which is like not her thing at all. And this is where she gets to know a cheerleader named Bibi, who's really popular, but is also I think the only trans athlete in the district. And so, they have sparks fly, both good and bad, between them as they have to work together, obviously, on this team. They have really cute dynamics, and so it's a really fun read, but it's also, you know, a deeper dive into how people don't want to be seen as one thing or another, how they're, you know, full human beings and want to be seen or treated as such, you know, good or bad. And so just super cute story. And then to go along with those, I paired Navigating with You, which is again kind of two unlikely femme friends who end up traveling together to finish this out of print manga series that they both find out that they love. They want to get all of the copies of it. I love this part as another cutesy romance. And what was Just Friends? Yeah, they're all kind of in that same vein and just kind of cozy reads with a little bit deeper themes, but not too serious if you're looking for kind of escapism too.
Cool. All right. So Stella, we're back to you, and we go from cats to dogs.
And that is exactly why I chose this topic, because I knew Ashley would be doing cats, and I had to get my love of dogs in there too. So it is a very wide, and that's my go-to with my students is, you know, when I'm doing searches, teaching them how to use the online catalog, I use dog, I use dogs, I use all sorts of things like that, because a lot of people and cats relate to that when we're looking. I absolutely love stray dogs. Think of The Secret Life of Pets, the Universal Studios movie where the dogs and the pets are all talking. Same exact thing. But this one, the stray is brought home to a household of dogs. And you know how they always talk about dogs don't have memory, but they do? Like they can't remember, you know, you're not supposed to punish them when they do something wrong because they don't remember what they did wrong. But then they'll remember meeting someone, you know, 10 years ago when they see him again. So they have this kind of weird, and that's what this dog does. She's like, why am I here? And there's something important that happened, and I don't know exactly what it is. So then that makes all the other dogs start questioning why they're there. And the whole while this is going on, there's little clues in the visuals of what's going on. I absolutely love it. Highly recommend it. My other choices were Mr. Muffin's Defender of the Stars. Excellent, fun kids, lots of action. I love that Mr. Muffins is chosen as the spiritual leader from the space aliens that land on Earth. There's a scene at the park where there's an older gentleman, senior, that's sitting and watching the kids play, and he's like, oh, look, a spaceship. They must be filming something here. Oh, that's pretty. Wow, that looks really. And he's like interspersed through the action that's going on. It's hilarious. And what it ends up being about a story about friends, about the dog and his best friend, and the space alien and the Earthling becoming friends. And it's just a wonderful story about friendship. The last one is the classic graphics, volume 25, Canine and Feline. So I did get some cats in there for you, Ashley. But written by several famous authors. It has everything from short stories to poetry and just beautiful artwork to go along with it. So enjoy reading about dogs.
All right. Equal representation, cats and dogs today. All right. So, Ashley, you are going to take us to the end with our last YA pick.
So this is A Witch's Life in Mongol, and this is actually a very special manga. I highly, highly recommend it. It's by Tomato Soup, which is a pen name for a mangaka, and it is this beautifully illustrated manga based on two very powerful women in the Mongolian Empire. Um, and it's been researched very, very carefully. So it features Fatima and kind of her origin story and how she became literate and knowledgeable as a woman in this period, and how she came to be the translator of Persian texts to Torjin Khatun, who was the wife of one of Genghis Khan's sons. And basically, these two women will have a profound impact on the Mongolian Empire. And so it's a very historically grounded story. And so it's one that is actually very perfect for teaching if you're doing like AP World Literature, but also it features a Muslim protagonist, and it's very, very fascinating. So it's perfect for your readers who are looking for something with with a lot of depth, with a lot of like historical grounding, who are looking for something, um, you know, hefty. I think that this is like perfect for those type of readers.
Awesome.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So we, excuse me, we are pretty close to the end, depending on when you count from where I started. So I want to close with a question for you guys, a different spin on RA. We've got an audience of adult readers, possibly non-comics readers themselves. We'll go Moni, Stella, Ashley. One book, all you know about this person is they're a librarian. And what's one of your favorite comics or manga that you'd recommend to an adult reader as a first entry into the medium? Tough one. I didn't prep you for this.
I mean, I have tremendous bias because this book brought our community of adult readers and teen readers together. But March by Andrew Iden and Congressman John Lewis is great because it's the right mix of reading level and accessibility with like their subsequent volumes. So if you love it, you can continue reading, which I had like adult readers who did not want to read the first volume at all for our community-wide read come begging to get volumes 2 and 3. And you know, it's such a message of hope and resilience. And again, it's appropriate at a teen and up level, so that can spur conversations and people of different ages. So that would be my pick, just witnessing the power of what a great comic book can do in a community, including adult readers.
Nice. Stella?
I am going to head back to the classics because there are a few that I have not read and I wanted to do it kind of quickly. And one of them was The Scarlet Letter, and it was so beautifully done. It's presented well. I read a bunch of reviews. I knew a lot about it being in, librarian. I just had never, it was not a part of our reading program. And just the way the topic was handled and the imaging and the way the characters were posted against each other. And my biggest advice is to start maybe with something you know or that you know a lot about, and slow down. Slow down. It's not, I need to get through this page. I need to, we're so used to like reading so fast because we're devouring it, but we need to remember, kind of like a meal, slow down, find the textures, find the different tastes, look at the different ways that the images share the same information, but just slow down, enjoy it.
Nice. Ashley?
Okay. I have two. One is probably the easy one, and that's Witch Hat Atelier.
Love that
Um,
book.
yeah, Witch Hat Atelier, I find, is the instant will make you a manga reader. I actually turned a manga reader I turned a novel reader into a manga reader this week with Witch Hat Atelier, which is a gorgeous story about a young girl trying to save her mother. I actually have a figure of Coco. But one that maybe you haven't heard of before, but it is also gorgeous, and it's only 2 volumes, is Planetes,
Hmm.
by Makoto Yukimura. Yep. Okay. Making sure I got the name right. And that's from Dark Horse. And it is this gorgeous space opera about trash men. Because in the future, there is so much trash and junk from these men who have these Elon Musk types who have overpolluted the Earth from interplanetary travel, and so being an astronaut is no longer glamorous. It is just a cleanup job, and you're just doing grunt work. And so Planetes is really about what we've kind of done, what we could potentially do to our planet, and what impacts that may have, and kind of the socio-political outcomes of that. So it's very prescient for our time.
Nice. Excuse me. I'm gonna throw one in myself. This a journal of my father, Jiro Taniguchi, was the first manga I read that made me understand manga could be so much more. Like I had that relationship with Western comics. Like Jason is one of my favorite indie creators. This one kind of hit me in a couple of different ways. Beautiful but subtle artwork, amazing story. It will, if you have whatever assumptions you have about comics, this would probably dispel them because it's probably none of those if you're not familiar with comics. That's what I think I first read it 2 years ago. Blew me away. Highly recommend it. So we are at the end and close to on time. Not bad. Pat myself on the back for keeping us tight. Want to thank all three of you, Moni, Stella, Ashley, for joining us again. Those of you that are here, thank you for sticking with us for an extra 5 or 6 minutes as we got through the end. We will have on our website the full archive available a couple of days after LibraryCon, and we will also have some nice takeaways probably after Thanksgiving that we'll pull some of these insights together. Not everybody wants to watch a 1 hour webinar. We're trying to make these a little more accessible to people after the fact with some key takeaways, including links to the resources rather than just that flat slide. So those of you who are here live, thank you. Those of you watching on demand, thank you. We hope you got something out of this. You can reach us at info@librarypass.com if you've got any questions about this webinar or Comics Plus. Thanks again. Have a great night, and we'll see you online. Take care.